Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemaphilepod.com. As a young boy, H.N. Shantha Murthy ran away from home to escape the extreme poverty of his Indian village. He traveled the country in search of work, holding on to the belief that one day his life would change. It did. Following a serendipitous encounter with a Texas couple with a sponsored visa, he traveled to the U.S. to pursue the American dream, and along with it, raised a family. And because of that, we're speaking to his daughter, our guest today. The film is called The Gas Station Attendant. We're rejoined on the program today by the director, Karla Murthy. Karla, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for being here. A deeply personal film. At what point in your life did you think that it's time to make a film about my dad, about my family, about our life? What struck you, or what was it that prompted you to move forward?
Yeah, I mean, I had never thought I would ever make a personal film, but when I first made the recordings, the phone recordings, with my dad, which are kind of sort of the backbone of the film, I always knew I wanted to do something from those recordings, which were from 20 years ago. And just for context, these were recordings of phone conversations I had with my father while he was working nights at a gas station back home in Texas. And I had just moved to New York, and he, had had many, many different jobs, and then was now found himself working there. And I was at this point in my life where I was also trying to figure out my life in New York. And he was recounting his memories of growing up in India and how he had come to the States. And I had heard those stories multiple times over my life. And so it was just kind of a project just to keep him company in the middle of the night. But when I heard the interruptions of, the cash register or people asking for cigarettes or whatever it was, it would snap me back into this reality of, realizing that although he had this miraculous, luck, winning the lotto basically to come to the States, we were always struggling financially. And what did that mean? And I think that was sort of the question I was asking in the film on a number of different levels is what is it all for? We have these dreams and aspirations and we reach them and then they're not quite what they seem. When I heard that, I knew there was something special in those recordings 20 years ago, but I just couldn't make anything with them. I tried and tried until I think it just took living and becoming a parent and making my first film. There were so many things that had to have happened for me to come to this place where I felt ready to expose myself and my family in this way and to kind of take a deep dive into my personal life in this way.
One of the things about watching The Gas Station Attendant, and that rings so true, is this kind of universal sense that as much as were raised by these people, whether or mother or father or mother or just a father, however that plays out, how often we don't know very much about them. We spend our entire life, the good part of the, first 20 years of our life with them. And I look back on my father and how little I know about him. And so this is, I think, universal. I don't know why. I can't explain it. I don't know. There's something about the parent-child relationship where they just don't do these things, or if I don't know. It's hard.
Yeah, that is the thing. I mean, I was really worried because this my story is very specific. I mean, how many Indian Filipino people do you know? But it is part of that canon of films of children trying to understand their parents. I mean, there are so many of these films that get made, and it's because of that, because we don't ask those questions and get to know them until often it's too late. And at the end of the day, that's what I kind of I hope inspires people to do is to kind of try to understand their parents in a new way, before it's too late.
Yeah, and I would say that the thing that kind of, again, I felt this pull watching the film. My dad was born literally a couple of months before the Great Depression. He lived through that. He lived through World War II. He went to Korea. There are so many things in his life, and I would say the same thing about your father. So many things, the birth of India, all of the things that happened in his childhood, all the things that it would be an invitation, you would think it would be an invitation to talk about. It would be an opening to talk about. And yet,
We don't. We don't. And I think it's because you hear the stories and all the time, but they just kind of gloss over when you're a child. You just kind of, they just become, just rote in your mind, oh, this is what my dad did. But you don't really understand what that would feel like and how that would kind of shape how you lived your life until maybe that you're a parent too, or you're just older and you start to understand, want to know the answers to those questions. And for me, it was like, okay, my dad was going from job to job a lot. Why was that? And I sort of like asked that question. I tried to structure so that these questions would be asked and then it would be answered in some kind of archival moment where I'm thinking about his life as a street kid, where he was constantly having to move from place to place to survive, and how that might inform how he lived his life here, for instance. But yeah, we just don't ask the questions. Yeah, and
your dad was so quietly determined. He feels, in terms of what I see in the film of him, very calm, seemed very loving, very kind of, I'll say mellow, may not be exactly the right word, but it just feels like he was comfortable in his own skin. And yet, this quiet determination that this didn't work, let's try this, this didn't work, let's try that, this kind of continually not giving up on himself. And certainly his commitment to your family. Those are the things that came across to me.
yeah, there's this, resilience that I think he had. And then I think a lot of, especially immigrant families have when they come to this country. They have to, in order to even just leave their home country and come here and survive, you kind of need that sort of drive to keep going. Otherwise, then what is it all for? And yeah, and there was just this sort of like optimism that he had. And as a kid, I think watching that happen, it was sort of like frustrating. Like I was like, I don't understand why he's so happy all the time. But then I kind of realized later, like, oh, well, it's nothing compared to what he left or what his life was like as a kid. Like this is all like gravy to a certain extent. But I do think there is this sort of drive and resilience that's needed to keep going, to survive, to make it here in this country.
We've been talking about your father in kind of broad terms. Let's talk about his history in terms of the United States being here in the US. What brought him to the US?
So this is, a spoiler alert for people who haven't seen the film because it is a nice reveal in the film, but he, had um, found himself working at a hotel in Delhi in the 50s. And this was one of the first hotels that were built for foreign diplomats. And one night, one, serendipitous night, he, one of his coworkers didn't show up and he had to work both wings of the hotel. And in that other wing, this couple arrived in the middle of the night from Houston and he waited on them. And this is sort of the mystery of it. Like, I don't know all the answers to the questions of what happened that night, but somehow he charmed them. And they, as the story goes, and now he's told it to me many, many times that night, they said, how'd you like to become a cowboy? And he thought they were joking. But the next day, they went to the embassy and started the paperwork for him to come to this country. And they sponsored him to live and to work and study in the States. And this was also in a time when immigration was much more open during that time between these two countries, but with America bringing people in. But yeah, it was just like this act of, I mean, it blows my mind sometimes to think what they did and how I would not exist if that moment in time had not happened. And if they weren't willing to trust my dad and to find something in him that they saw in him that they wanted to take this effort to bring him and have him live in their home. I recently connected with the daughters of Leo and Faye Kern, who are the people who brought my dad over. They passed away many years ago, and it was just an amazing. I hadn't seen them in years, like since I was a little girl, and we all had dinner together in Houston, and it was just so. I just like thanked them. I mean, I just had tears in my eyes when I was talking with them. Like your parents, this is something we don't see very often today, this kind of kindness. And I was just so thankful and full of gratitude to their parents for taking that chance on my father.
You have an interesting family in addition to your father. Your birth mother passed away when you were very young. Your
Mhm.
father remarried. You have sisters, you have relatives. I mean, all of it's in the film. By the way, just very, very quickly, I just want to let people know that we're talking about the film The Gas Station Attendant, and we're speaking with the director, Karla Murthy. It is going to be premiering at the Sheffield Doc Fest, and that's coming up June 19th at the Curzon Theater, as well as on June 21st at the Light Theater, and this is Sheffield. So congratulations on your acceptance into this prestigious documentary film festival. I want to talk a little bit about, so your family, your immediate family, and the kind of the impact that your early part of your life had on your family and on you.
I think like when you're a kid, you're just much more accepting of what's happening around you, and you kind of take it as, this is just the way the world works. So I think, for instance, like having my mother pass away at a young age, you are just much more, I mean, as an 8-year old, it just felt like that was just the way life is. Whereas for my like my oldest sister was 16 at the time, and that was a very different experience for her. And also just seeing, just how we know how to struggle with money. And that was just, it just becomes part of how you think life is supposed to be. And you don't start to think differently until you leave home and you have that distance. And, even like, for instance, like having my mother die at that age, I mean, she was in her 40s. I always thought, oh, I think I didn't realize that inside of me, I thought, oh, that was going to happen to me as well. Like that I would also die at that age. And I remember when I became the age that she died, like, and saw my kids, and I was just so like, oh, wow. Like I thought it was a milestone for me to kind of make it, but beyond, her age. So yeah, it's interesting because you don't really think about how those things, how your childhood affects you till you have that distance away, and it's a continual thing too as well. I think that's why people go to therapy.
The things you're talking about, I mean, what we're raised in what we consider at the time normalcy. We consider this normal, right? And you're
Yeah.
right. So you get a little distance from that. You don't know whether this was a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, in regard to your sort of the financial situation with your father, he never lacked for effort, for working hard. So all of that sort of dynamic would have been in play. But the fact that I don't know if it was a bonding experience, the fact that you were, had to deal with some financial issues was bonding, or if it was something that put stress on the family. I'm sure both of those things were probably true at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. It was both. Yeah. And I
Yeah,
think that's also something that's common with a lot of families too. I think, there's a lot of families that struggle financially, and how they navigate that affects how you live your life. Yeah.
I think that's probably more true than not true, is
Mm.
what that is absolutely. I think that's right. Again, coming back to the film and its universality, the idea of families who are in there were good times. There are obviously all the things that you're sharing in the film that I completely understood and related to on my own particular set of experiences. In terms of the reaction with your family to the
Mhm.
film, what's been, has there been a multiple reactions, or what's it been basically for you?
Yeah, that was the scariest part of making this film, was what my family was going to think. I have 5 siblings, and my oldest sister, as I said, was 8 years older than me. My youngest brother is 15 years younger than me. And so we have like a gamut. And, I also have my stepmother who's alive too. And we all have different relationships with my dad. We would all make a very different film, maybe about my dad, and have different experiences. And so throughout the filmmaking process, I just kind of let them into the process a little bit. And I really wanted it to be only from my experience. I didn't want to make a biopic about my dad. It was very much from my point of view. So I had to be very clear about that and kind of explain what this film was. Like, it's not a biopic. I think one of my siblings even asked, like, so when are you going to interview me? And I was like, oh, it's not that kind of film. So I actually let them see, I think I was almost to the fine cut. I gave them a link to the film and I thought, okay, I'm going to send it to them each separately so that they can all kind of internalize it separately. And I'm really glad I did that. We haven't had like a group screening together, which I hope we're going to do soon. And actually, one of my sisters is coming to the premiere, but it was a range of emotions, I think. My stepmother said, she just cried and cried and cried at the end. And it was like watching all of our home movies, and just reliving all of it again. I think when my brother said he didn't want it to end. And yeah, I was so relieved by hearing some of their reactions and that they gave me their blessing, basically. I was just so relieved.
Families are so fraught with all kinds of different things that you're right, just as you described it, everyone's individual reaction or any individual relationship is different than the others, and understandably, but your father comes across as again, to me, very kind and very thoughtful person who, as I said earlier, this quiet determination. He seemed really dedicated to whatever it was he was working on and
Mhm.
whatever he was doing with you in those moments where you were sharing, your conversations with each other and just a, yeah, I'm good. I'm glad to hear the basically that was their reaction because that's what comes across in the film. What was the hardest part about putting this together? And also on the other side of it, what were the most joyful parts of the film for you to kind of
Yeah. Um, there were so many difficult parts. I don't know. Let me try and think of one. I think, just is comprised of a lot of home movies and, just phone clips that I took, like my own home movies, and none of that I ever, was meant to be in a feature documentary film. So that was challenging in and of itself. And just trying to create this sort of very, almost like a video diary, and it had to have this feel of it being sort of a stream of consciousness, although a very highly, highly edited stream of consciousness. So that dealing with that kind of footage was very difficult. And I tried to actually bring on an editor to help me, and it didn't work. It was like, this is not that kind of film and footage that would mean something to sell. It also just felt like someone was rummaging through like my underwear drawer. Like it's like, okay, no, I have to choose clips here. So that was very challenging. And I think also just living in a space of I think I even mentioned it in the film of feeling like you're in this time warp for 3 years, edit or, I've been working on it for that, editing it for the last 2 years. But yeah, that's really hard to be in that space and hearing my dad's voice. And, that was hard. But I think like in terms of the joyful parts, I loved doing the scene of him coming to the States. That was such a fun scene to do. And because I'm using home videos, I kind of broke all the rules that I would normally have when I'm editing something. So, like, not, it's not like all sequential. Like, I could just kind of edit through by emotion. And that scene was just such a fun scene to do. And my composer, it was like a very long scene as well. It was like a 6 minute kind of one music cue. And that was just yeah, his moment of coming to the States and also just being able to find the footage that we did of that hotel. I worked with a great archival producer, Peter Knopfs, who's just amazing. And he was able to find that early footage of the Ashoka Hotel from the 50s. And yeah, actually creating each of the four I call them the Dream India segments of recounting his story of coming to the States. Those were so fun to make. And I was just collaging footage and doing a real old school, layering things, in Premiere. And I had a lot of fun creating those moments and creating this kind of dreamlike, atmosphere with that footage.
your voiceover in the film is meditative and haunting as well. The shots of the gas station,
Mm.
that part of the film, it feels noirish even. I'll end on this. The idea of the immigrant experience, and I think we are too cavalier here in the United States. We become kind of callous about that. But the idea that somebody who grew up somewhere else in another part of the world would pick up, leave all that they know to come somewhere that they don't. It's an incredibly brave act. It's incredibly
And
transformative.
Chris. Yeah,
What's
and
it?
transform. I
Go
was going
ahead.
to say risk.
Risky, all of those things. And
Mhm.
we here in the US have become callous and I think heartless about what that takes, no matter where they're coming from. And I feel, but for watching when I'm watching the film and I'm thinking, who does this? I mean,
Mhm.
I can't imagine going somewhere else in the world, just
Mhm.
picking up and leaving. But people do it all the time because for a lot of reasons, a lot of great reasons, and a lot of very heartbreaking reasons as well. So all of that is that's what came across for me watching that part of the film.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to call it the gas station attendant. It is very reductive. And, some people said, why did you call it that when it's so much, he was so much more than that.
Yeah,
And it's because of this, the idea, this concept of the intimate stranger, which for me in the film meant that person that you interact with every day that you don't know. And
yeah.
that's the gas station worker, the taxi driver, the convenience store clerk, which there are moments in the film kind of recognizing those stories. Who are they? And they have these stories. I didn't want to do like a Slumdog Millionaire type of story. I wanted to show a real person with flaws, but
Yeah.
who's a very loving, full human person. And yeah, so I hope that that's what people will take away from the film when they encounter those people who work as the intimate strangers in our life, and that they will realize that they probably have a story very similar to my father's.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for the gas station attendant. Thank you for your work, your previous work. The place that makes us, by the way, you can go to the filmschoolradio.com website to listen to our conversation about that. A terrific piece of documentary work on that as well. And also, congratulations on having worked with one of my favorite journalists of all time, Bill Moyers. Truly one of the greats. And
Yeah.
so,
I'm very thankful to have gotten a chance to work with him.
thank you. Again, we're speaking with the director of The Gas Station Attendant, Karla Murthy. Karla, thank you so much for your time today.
Actually, if I can add one little thing,
Sure.
in this film, I reference the place that makes us. I don't know if you caught it, but it's in my narration, and it's in the section in the round the world part where I'm talking about seeing my mother in the Philippines, and the idea that you see, it's a gift to be able to see your parents in the place that makes them,
Oh,
where they suddenly start to make sense. It's like a puzzle pieces, falling into place. You're like, oh, I get who they are. And that was sort of one of the driving things of wanting to make this film is to understand the place that made him.
this documentary film is called The Gas Station Attendant, and we've been speaking with the director, Karla Murthy. Karla, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.